Hey, I'm Tom. That back there is Mike. And I really love old people. They're great. They smell good, they have fun treats, and sometimes they're good at wrestling. In 1993, WCW wanted to celebrate the old person, and specifically old wrestlers. They wanted to reunite them. And I appreciate that, which is why today's video is a brief history of WCW Slamboree. Now let's go back to spring of 93. A new leaf is turned in World Championship Wrestling. New management, no longer are drunken rednecks peeing out of CNN Center windows. Now we've got Eric Bischoff running the television department and making some big changes. Turner in particular, Turner Home Entertainment, wanted to add some more pay-per-views to the schedule because they figure we can't necessarily make more money by doing better, so let's just do more things. Quantity over quality. And thus the idea came about for Slamboree, a Legends Reunion, a pay-per-view extravaganza where the stars of WCW would come together with the stars of yesteryear and they'd get in their little tights and they roll around, but segregated. The old guys would wrestle the old guys, the young guys would wrestle the young guys as a whole thing. Now, in the early 90s, wrestling conventions were not what they are now, where you could just go to one every weekend, go and meet the Godfather in every major city in America behind a table somewhere. No, it was a relatively new thing. In fact, the only thing like that I can think of is John Arezzi, who was a radio show host in the Long Island area, would do his Weekend of Champions every year. And it was really successful, but we just didn't have that attachment to nostalgia that we do now, where we can't grow up. Us millennials and Gen Xers, we're always going to be listening to the Shins and watching Boy Meets World. WCW borrowed some of the convention aesthetic. The night before Slamboree, the first Slamboree, they had like a convention slash dinner thing where you can eat with your favorite old wrestlers. Have you ever wanted to chew down on some sausage gravy with Dory Funk Jr.? You could have at Slamboree. I believe it was called Slam Feast or something like that. Slam Meat. Imagine meeting Jimmy Snuka at Slam Meat. And as part of Slamboree, we're not just celebrating the old timers. They're getting ring time. WCW at this time had a pretty big roster. And like half the roster didn't make the pay-per-view because they had 3 Legends matches on this show. Though, ironically enough, Brad Armstrong did get ring time on one of his few pay-per-views because his dad got hurt. And it wasn't even mostly like Georgia or Jim Crockett or WCW nostalgia. At the time, Greg Gagne was working under Eric Bischoff in the WCW office. So they just went all crazy with AWA nostalgia, like Baron Von Raschke. Jim Brunzell was a legend on this show, which is nuts since he was literally on WWF TV like the year before. You could rent Coliseum videos that were coming out at the time with Jim Brunzell on them. And also, of the 3 Legends matches, only one of them had a winner because the old guys that weren't on TV couldn't figure out who was going to lose the match. They also launched the WCW Hall of Fame that night. Lou Thez, Mr. Wrestling 2, Eddie Graham, and Vern Gagne, more of that AWA influence coming in. They were the inaugural WCW Hall of Fame inductees. What was funny was the WWF heard that WCW was going to do a Hall of Fame, and they kind of rushed one together. I don't think they even had a ceremony. Just 1 week on Raw, like a couple weeks before, they're like, we also have a Hall of Fame, and Andre the Giant's in it. Yeah. There were other things on the show that happened that weren't old guy related. Sid Vicious returned to the company after his Sid Justice run in the WWF. He squashed Van Hammer. There was the whole Scott Norton debacle where he was supposed to wrestle Sting that night, but Ole Anderson had walked up to him in the locker room a week or 2 before and made up a story about how Sting was complaining that when they wrestled in Japan, he was way too stiff. And Scott Norton's like, fuck that guy, I'm out of here. On short notice, they called the one guy who they knew the WWF wouldn't be bringing back, Nails, who had just attacked Vince McMahon in a locker room in Wisconsin a few months before that. They announced him on Saturday night as Nails. Nails is coming to WCW. By like 9 o'clock Saturday night, they got a cease and desist. So he had to be the prisoner as Sting beat him. There's also the whole Los Dos Hombres thing where the Hollywood Blondes lost to Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas under masks on TV a week or two before. And then in the meantime, Shane Douglas had quit WCW, but they didn't want to like stop advertising the match. So they sent Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas out to the ring in these hideous red and green stocking looking costumes and said that they wore them for good luck. Shane Douglas was played that night by Tom Zink. And there was supposed to be a Four Horsemen reunion that night, but there were some shenanigans. And even though they pretty much announced Tully Blanchard was going to be there as part of the Horsemen, he wasn't. And thus Paul Roma became the most unlikely of Horsemen. A year later, Slamboree heads to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And in that year, a little company called ECW had blown up. And even though Paulie Dangerously did not have a great relationship with WCW, ECW's actual owner at the time, Todd Gordon, he did. For years, Todd Gordon had been running bus trips and working with WCW to promote events in the Philadelphia area. And Slamboree 94 was no different. The owner of ECW ran a bus trip to Slamboree in Philadelphia. Not only that, they promoted Slamboree on ECW television. That year, we went from 3 Legends matches to 1 because they figure if we only bring in a couple of these guys, they won't be such a headache about doing jobs. Except they were. They actually got Tully Blanchard to come in this time. He wrestled Terry Funk, who was getting the big old push key in ECW as the living legend, and he didn't want to do a job in his town. Tully didn't want to do a job, so they did a double disqualification. But what was more interesting is we essentially got ECW Terry Funk on Slamboree. Terry's supposed to be the heel in the match, but he's just playing up to all the ECW fans in the front row. Hat Guy and Faith No More Guy and all those dudes, they were all up there. And Terry's just playing to them the whole time. It's like an audience of 10. It's hilarious. That year, Ole Anderson got into the Hall of Fame because, of course, he's working for the company, as was Jody Hamilton, the Assassin, another Hall of Fame inductee. Ernie Ladd got the nod, and the lead inductee, Harley Race. What's notable about that is Harley Race was the manager of the top heel in the company, Vader. And they sent Harley Race out to be like, hey guys, thank you. You're all so nice. I love you. I love you for giving me this award. Right before he goes out for the main event and tells all the fans to shove it up their ass. Slamboree 94, also famous for the Broad Street Bully match. Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan, replacing Max Payne, wrestled the Nasty Boys in one of the damnedest street fights you'll ever see. It holds up to this day. It's fantastic. David Schultz, not Dr. D, but the Philadelphia Flyers player, the Broad Street Bully, hence the name. He's the referee, and he's just watching these buffoons go crazy. I know the Spring Stampede match is kind of the standard with Cactus and Max Payne against the Nasties, but this one's just as good in my opinion. And then in the main event, it was supposed to be Vader versus babyface Rick Rude for the International World title, that whole mess. Where the NWA belt was the NWA belt, and then it couldn't be the NWA belt anymore, whole thing. Sting replaces Rick Rude because Rick Rude's spine goes in Japan, and Sting wins the International World title. He's the last International World Champion because they just united it with the regular world title like a month later. Slamboree 95 the next year, St. Petersburg, Florida. There's a whole rigmarole about this Hall of Fame. In 1995, Randy Savage had just started with the company. He was very sensitive about the wrestling companies he worked for, addressing his father, Angelo Poffo, as a major star, even though Angelo Poffo had not been a star for the WWF or WCW or Crockett or anything. And thus he insisted that they induct Angelo Poffo into the WCW Hall of Fame. Also inducted that year, Terry Funk, which is interesting because he was even further into his ECW run. And they bring him into WCW for Slamboree to wave to people, say, hi, I love you all so much, while he's being a fucking lunatic in most of the country at like 2 a.m. on syndication. As well as Wahoo McDaniel, Antonio Inoki, Dusty Rhodes, which featured a pretty famous cameo from A Little American Nightmare, Lil Cody. Someday that boy would grow up to have his WrestleMania main events fucked with year after year after year. Who would have known? And the most fascinating one, Big John Studd. This is fascinating because a few weeks beforehand, on ABC's Wide World of Sports, they did a story about steroid use in pro sports. Big John Studd had been having some health issues. And in that feature, he straight up blamed all of his health issues on steroid abuse while he was an active wrestler. Gordon Solie was to host the Hall of Fame ceremony. Now, a lot of folks think that Gordon Solie raised hell because of Angelo Poffo. That is not true. He understood the political game. He'd been in wrestling for decades. What he did not like was WCW glorifying a legendary wrestler who had gone on national television and spoken candidly about his steroid abuse. Gordon believed that WCW should not be promoting and glorifying someone who had gone on national television and spoken openly about how his wrestling success came because of his steroid abuse. Gordon put in his notice. He's like, I'm quitting. I'm done with this company. So days before Slamboree, they go up to Gordon and they're like, listen, will you stay if we induct you in the Hall of Fame? They play to his ego. And they do this whole thing where they pretend that they're surprising Gordon with a Hall of Fame induction at the very end. Gordon is appeased for like a few weeks. He ends up quitting by the end of summer anyway. Again, only one Legends match in 95. Wahoo McDaniel defeats Dick Murdoch. So we actually got a winner and a loser in one of these damn Legends matches. In the main event, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage defeat Ric Flair and Vader because, of course. But at the end of the night, Ric Flair attacks Angelo Poffo because Randy needed to get his dad more screen time. And that started a feud that would go on for over a year. And despite what people say, the NWO was not the catalyst to WCW's big comeback in 96. It was Randy Savage and Ric Flair's feud. Go look up the attendance figures. They start popping the houses well before Hall and Nash come in. The next year, in 1996... they all sit around a table. They're like, we don't think the kids like old people anymore. We got to end this Hall of Fame thing. We got to end the whole Legends thing. What do the kids like? And someone speaks up. Darn it. The kids love the Lethal Lottery. They love Battle Bowl. And they love their pants baggy. Slamboree that year was based around the Lethal Lottery. The first time in 2.5 years they had done one. But unlike Starrcade 91 and Battle Bowl 93, they didn't just stick it to the tournament format. No, they did a whole other damn show on top of the Lethal Lottery. In 2 hours and 45 minutes, WCW shoved 15 matches onto Slamboree that year. 15. Now, this might be a surprise to some of you, but pro wrestling, not on the level. I know. Crazy. But when you're doing something like the Lethal Lottery, sometimes you should put in a little bit of effort to make it look like it's not completely predetermined and that you actually did a little bit of random work. Get some of these random teams, quote unquote. The Public Enemy, like both of them together. You had one match where Ming wrestled the Barbarian. You had another match where Hawk wrestled Animal. Another match where Rick Steiner wrestled Scott Steiner. 3 matches where partners somehow randomly got put against each other. On top of that, Randy Savage and Ric Flair, who I told you had started feuding the previous year, they're partners. Random. And also partners were Kevin Sullivan and Chris Benoit. Yup. And now I need to do my my ritual real quick since I mentioned Benoit and Sullivan. Benoit truthers, go away! Stay out of my comments! Ah! Of course, the Lethal Lottery leads to Battle Bowl, which is supposed to be a battle royal with the winners of all the other matches from the first 2 rounds of a tag team tournament. Again, so many matches. But for some reason, like halfway through the battle royal, it becomes like pinfalls only. And DDP beats like 4 dudes in a row with the Diamond Cutter to become the Lord of the Ring. He's the biggest damn golem I've ever seen. Now, he was also supposed to get a world title match on pay-per-view because he won it, but they didn't think that part out too well. It's like, shit, in 1996, DDP ain't quite over enough to main event a pay-per-view, especially when we got this NWO thing started. So we're going to make up something about how that guy's foot was under the rope, and you can keep the ring. We don't care about the ring, but you ain't getting your world title match, Diamond. Slamboree 97, they just give up on having it be anything special. No tournaments, no Hall of Fame. The only real specialness around this is they throw so many damn football players on this show. Reggie White from the Green Bay Packers pops in because he's a wrestling fan and Let's just get him in the ring. He loses to Steve Mongo McMichael in a real weird match. Kevin Green pops up in the main event. He helps Roddy Piper and Ric Flair defeat the Wolfpack. There had been a lot of kerfluffing around this time. Kevin Nash and Roddy Piper were cutting shoot promos on each other, leading to the pay-per-view. Nash is like, your generation fucked my generation. Roddy Piper's like, oh yeah, we fucked your mom too, huh? You guys sucked, Oz. They got into a fight backstage. Piper couldn't hit a double leg takedown, and Nash like pie-faced him, and then Roddy Piper like ran away embarrassed. Either way, the whole thing ended up with the feud ending the next month because Piper and Flair could not work with the Outsiders, and thus they had to turn on each other so that they could work with somebody that they trusted. And also on this show, the main show debut of Ernest the Cat Miller. He ran in and did a wacky kick after the Glacier Mortis match. Slamboree 98 the next year is probably most notable for the Cruiserweight Battle Royal. Dean Malenko had been off TV depressed because Chris Jericho made fun of his dad. Jericho had no challengers, so at Slamboree he was supposed to wrestle the winner of a Cruiserweight Battle Royal. Shockingly, Cyclope, who had probably not won a match up to this point in WCW, wins the Battle Royal. Chris Jericho's like, okay, cool. You're going to wrestle Cyclope on pay-per-view. And then like Cinderella at midnight, the pumpkin comes off. It's Dean Malenko. And he gets the biggest damn reaction you'll ever hear. Just staring at Jericho. Like it's one of the hottest like 2 or 3 minutes of wrestling you'll ever see, genuinely. It's so good. It's on YouTube. Go watch it. Also on that show, DDP and Raven continued their feud that weaved through MTV and other such places in a Bowery death match. What's a Bowery death match? It's a cage match with a roof where weapons are hanging all over the place. Listen, between this and the Clockwork Orange House of Fun, I think Scott Levy really should have considered going into interior design after pro wrestling. He's got an eye for it. Of course, they redo the Tommy Dreamer chair shot heard around the world, and Canyon pops up. A lot of things. It's a Raven match. Like 27 different things happen. In the main event, there's a WCW World Tag Team title match, because fuck if Hulk Hogan's going to show up. It's Sting and the Giant versus Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Now, in the weeks leading up to this match, the Giant had joined the NWO Black and White. The Outsiders were in the Wolfpack. Sting was in WCW. During the match, Scott Hall turns on Kevin Nash and joins the Black and White crew. So you end up with a WCW guy and a Black and White guy against a Wolfpack dude and a Black and White dude. It's a whole mess, girl. Slamboree 99, most notable likely for WCW trying to create its own stable. As Gorgeous George, who was Randy Savage's girlfriend at the time, defeats Charles Robinson in a singles match. And bless their hearts, they tried as hard as they could. It wasn't going to happen. And I love Charles Robinson. This is not me putting him down at all. One of the all-time great referees. He's still going to this day. Big George Michael fan. Big horror movie historian. He was not Luna Vachon or Jacqueline or even Mark Marrow. The match was better than you'd think, but it's still ugh. Also on this show, Roddy Piper defeated Ric Flair to become the president of WCW. How did he do this? Well, you see, Flair had won the match, but he won it under shady means. And then Eric Bischoff came down. He reversed the decision. Roddy Piper was now president. One major problem with that. Ric Flair had won the presidency in January by defeating Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff had not been seen on television for months afterwards because, in canon, he didn't have power. But now he's back and he has more power than the president. Because this is real and that was fake. But also, we're still keeping that fake roll around. And he's making rulings on the job that he lost. And in the main event, Kevin Nash beat DDP to win the world title. DDP had just won the belt a month earlier. Poor guy. But he'd have his chance to win it back the next year. Slamboree 2000. So many matches. This we're well into the Bischoff and Russo regime. And they book like 1 million matches on this show, and almost none of them matter. But the main event, an homage to Ready to Rumble, which had just come out, the triple cage. You had to make your way up all 3 of the cages to get to the belt at the top of the building. It was DDP, Jeff Jarrett, who had just jumped from the WWF a few months before, and David Arquette, the current WCW World Heavyweight Champion at the time. Because this was booked by Vince Russo, swerve baby, it's coming. David Arquette, who was DDP's best friend leading up to the whole shebang, turns on him, he hits him with a guitar, and my hero Jeff Jarrett wins the world title. But arguably as notable as the finish was a spot right before it. Kanyon came out to save DDP, and he was jumped by Mike Awesome, who was in the New Blood. Throws Kanyon off of the giant 20-foot cage, through the ramp below, which was a spectacular looking bump. Kanyon deserves all the credit in the world for doing it. However, it was only about a year before Owen Hart had fallen from the ceiling and over the edge and passed away, which is bad enough. But the pay-per-view was in Kemper Arena, the same building where Owen Hart perished. What the fuck, man? What are we doing? That's just water. WCW goes and dies in March 2001. We weren't going to have a Slamboree 2001 anyway. They had changed all the pay-per-view names to match the 7 deadly sins. You know, like greed and gluttony and all the good stuff. Pride. The June one was actually going to be called Pride, which is pretty progressive. Doesn't matter because WCW died. So there you have it. A brief history of WCW Slamboree, the May pay-per-view tradition that has not been a tradition for 26 years. If you have any thoughts on the video or any Slamborees in the past, comment. Please, I need you to do that. You to like the video, the thumbs up thing, comment, subscribe. Please, I'm trying to get to 100,000. My kids are going to spit on my grave if I don't get that plaque thing, so please, we got to do it, guys. And if hyping is an option, please hype. I really need you to hype. Anything for the algae. That's what I call the algorithm. The algae. I'm an algae guy. Once again, my name is Tom. That's Mike back there. And I just did that without even looking.